There should have been a rail or some sort of fencing. How are you? Good, I'm good. Good morning. Hey, Mr. Okay, have we got that?
Yeah, it's coming. Yeah.
Not yet.
He's like 5 minutes away, but he will go and fetch it from the hangar. So by the time you finish the first bit, by the time Gavin starts, yes, it should be up. Or I'm hoping. So I'm not here. And then it's your
I might have one in my. I can walk to my hangar here.
Steve is here as well.
Yeah? Maybe somebody's got one in their pocket. Anybody got a memory stick in their pocket?
It's a good idea class, Steve, as well. For his
Okay,
and you wanted to talk about something about launch. Cool, so let's go.
You know, when it's got a slightly have you had a nice little city yet?
One more point.
There are those who have, those who are going to have.
How are you, Brendan? Is the link up and running now? Yeah.
Okay. Cool, can I... Okay, good morning everybody.
Morning.
Morning. I think it's a good time to have this, it's a safety meeting followed by the instructor seminar, but I mean the instructor seminar part is the safety meeting as well. And it's a good time to have it because the regionals are going to start in about a week's time. And these meetings tend to raise awareness on safety. And I think that's the key here. We want to be safe, we want to be incident or event free. You know, and this is a good time to cover a few main points, a few things, address a few things that we've seen over the past couple of months as we're gaining more experience with the Lombarda and all that. And that's the heart of today is Gavin's presentation on the tow upsets with a special emphasis on lessons learned with the Lombarda now. Now, a lot of you will remember that I think we had these sessions quite some time ago now. I thought a couple of years back, but it's actually more like 5 years ago when we had a series of these lectures about tow upsets and other topics as well. And I think one of the best ones was the one done by Gavin on the tows. I think certainly I learned a lot from that. And it's good to refresh. It's good to update it, and for the people that joined in the meantime that haven't heard it before, it's a very good lecture to listen to. Please sign the register because we are mandated to have these meetings. So register proves that we've had it. So please sign. You'll see 2 columns, one for the safety meeting, and then instructors, if I can please ask you to stay afterwards for another maybe 20 minutes, half an hour or so. We need to talk about the new incoming CFI and a couple other things as well. So I just want to cover that, and then I think we've got everything noted.
Just a quick point that when we had a safety meeting once before, we told the man in charge,
Yeah.
he had to sign off on our logbooks that we'd attended.
I don't know if that's a requirement, but we can do it. I don't think safety meeting needs to happen that way. Certainly for the instructor seminar part, that's what he was usually signing up. I did find the stamp, so we can do that later. but I think they never asked me. They asked for this about a few months ago for the previous years. They never asked me to show the logbook. They asked me for the register, so I think that's enough.
I think it's with the CAA's long list of requirements for documentation. I think it's a good idea.
Cool. So if you've got your logbooks here, I'll happily sign
the
this
logbooks.
Gavin, just close the curtain behind you, please.
So yeah, just back to Gavin's presentation. I think most of us are familiar with the accident pyramid kind of theory, where after a certain number of events you have an incident, and then after a certain number of incidents you would have an accident. So that's kind of statistically proven that that's how it happens. So I think we've had a few events, and it's a good time to kind of address that and hopefully kind of prevent it continuing in that sort of direction. I've mentioned regionals, that's coming up. We're going to have one more session like this before the regionals for those that couldn't make it today. And then we're going to have another one after the regionals when Gavin's back from Cape Town, sort of late May or maybe even early June. And the last thing that I want to mention is that you'll see now on the notice board the declared training organization. So we are no longer an ATO. That's fresh off the press. That happened on the 13th of April. So now we've got a new number. So that's very important for, when we fill out the forms and stuff. Each form for renewals or training or whatever asks for the ATO number. So that changed. So that's now on the notice board here. I've got a couple extra copies. And I see it as a good thing. I know maybe not everybody shares the opinion, but what used to happen is that we kind of had the set of rules which we were governed by in terms of the CAA that were actually originally made for the PPL, CPL, ATPL kind of scenario, which doesn't really apply in our case. So now we are, the way I see it, we are kind of reverting back to the way it was before us. So we say how we're going to conduct things, and then we must stick to that. Now, what do we say? I don't know, because Nikki, who is the head of training at the SSSA, he's coming for the regionals, and then he's going to have another presentation, at least with me and a few instructors, I guess, where he's going to present what the changes are. I don't right now know what's different, but certainly something is different. So so that will be communicated in due course, and there will be an instructors training course as well coming up soon, and then the exams we'll be doing in-house. So that's one of the changes that's coming. So we'll be doing that. So we won't need to go to the CAA or whatever. So I see it as a good thing, and then the details to follow. But just so you know, all the forms from basically now onwards need to have this new number on it. It's there on the board, and it's 0006/DTO. That's the new number. Okay, cool. So back to today, we're going to stick to the plan. So I've done the introduction. Now I'm going to hand over to Mark House, the safety officer, who is going to talk about a couple of things, and then we're going to get started with Gavin's presentation, which is going to be about 45 minutes. So we should be finished by about 11 or so, and then we shouldn't stay here too long because it looks like a decent day and we want to fly.
Yeah.
Cool.
Okay, I'll keep it as brief and short as possible. Okay, I was just looking to check if Peter Cook was here. Firstly, as safety officer of Michali's Gliding Club, I'd just like to open by thanking Peter for all the work and effort that he's done over the last number of years. Thank you, Peter. Right, to move on to this incident that we had recently with the towing behind a Lombardo. Steve and Gavin are going to go into a bit more detail on the do's and don'ts about towing, and particularly with Gavin's excellent presentation. So I'm not going to labour on those points. But as safety officer over the last number of months, I've become quite concerned about the number of incidents we've had, specifically behind the Lombardo. And they all seem to be generally a problem with slack rope. Okay, and also getting out of position. So we'd like to, in that briefing with Steve and particularly Gavin, just focus on the issue of slack ropes and how to overcome the problem. But I'd like to start the report on the last fairly serious incident with the Twin Aster, with this broken canopy on tow behind the Lombardo, with a talk from Mark. He was pilot in command at the time as instructor. Thank you, Mark.
Are you giving it to me now?
Yes.
Okay.
Putting you in the hot seat.
Okay. So, let me start off by saying, of all those things in the long gliding career, the incredibly long training program to actually be solo, staying behind the tug or staying in position was never one of my weaknesses. I've always prided myself, from about the third flight behind. I've never ever struggled. So let me go back to the time of the incident. I was with a PAX. She was a PPL and they'd come out just to see what gliding was like. They actually flew in. And basically we had a very normal takeoff, very normal, everything was completely normal. We were about 6,500, we were almost ready to get off the tow. And what happened then was, the next thing I realized, now I'm not saying, I don't want to just, the tug turned quite aggressively to the right. And I'm still in my mind, I'm not sure if I just didn't pick it up quick enough, or that the tug, I can't say the tug turned too aggressively. I think that would be stupid to say that. Anyway, at the end of the day, I landed up, I was like 3 wing lengths to the left of the tug. I was completely out of position. But I say completely, I've never seen myself that far out of position ever. And it happened like snap. So in my anxiety to get back into position, obviously I turned back to get in behind the tug. And that was my probably mistake number 2, is that I did this also too aggressively. And when I got back in position behind the tug, I now had another problem, because now this rope was lying over my wing. And as far as I can remember, and Mark might dispute this because he's got physical evidence. I think you've got some weather marks. Anyway, so now the tow rope is looped over my wing. And I immediately decide that I am now going to release and turn away from this rope as quickly as possible. In my haste, I was going to go into a high tow position. I was just where I was, probably just behind the tug. I released and turned to my right to get away from this tow rope, which was, looped on my wing. And I thought I actually got away. And I had I was turning, I was looking right, but I had the tow plane, because also the next thing you've got to avoid the tow plane. I had everything, I thought everything was under control. I got off. And the next thing I just heard this almighty crash, and there were like literally shards of canopy falling down into the cockpit. Did do some, my arm was bleeding a little bit, but I mean this was minor. So the first thing I did was what people say you should do is wind your watch. So I looked around, I had airspeed, okay, that's good. I looked then again, okay, I wasn't falling out the sky. Okay, I was at good height, I had enough height, I was nearly 7,000 feet. In fact, I had to burn off some height to get down to in downwind position. It was incredibly noisy. I mean, incredibly noisy. I tried to make radio calls, I'm not sure if anybody heard them, or maybe they just said or whatever. Just did everything very slowly, very gently, in case there was other damage that I didn't know. The glider felt good in all respects. Didn't feel like there was any damage to the glider. They had a completely uneventful landing other than the fact that there wasn't a canopy. And yeah, I was a little bit shaken. My backs was a little bit shaken. But I decided immediately I needed to go back. I needed to just do another flight just for my own personal view. And the taxi, my father was also with her, and she initially didn't want to come with me for reasons, obvious reasons. But her father actually talked her back into going up with me. And she did, and she was very brave. I mean, you know, considering that this is something she was unfamiliar with. We went back up. We had a completely uneventful flight. Never had any issues with the tow rope. Got to decent height, found a thermal, gave us some stick time, came back in and landed. And I must say, I felt much better for doing that. So, anyway. So, I always, if you look at these accident reports, you always see there's a couple of things. And just like, I think it was one stupid mistake after another. Okay, so let's just say I was out of position. Okay, I wasn't high and I wasn't low. But that is not an intrinsically dangerous position as far as I've read to be. You know, I might pull the tug pilot around a bit and I might have to buy him a beer afterwards. But it wasn't like a life-threatening or dangerous position. The problem started when I tried to fix it. Okay, and that's where the issue began. That was my first mistake. Mistake number 2 was not being in high tow. I don't think I've ever realized, I mean, we've always been trained, you go into high tow and you release. You don't, I've never actually kind of twigged that you go into high position for a reason. You go into high position so when you release, the tow rope's below you and you're not going to get involved with the tow rope. So I think that's something in hindsight that I was like going through my head all the time, that I actually realized, actually why are you going to high tow? You know, I mean, I know you do it, but I don't know why you do it. But I learned from the hard way. So that was my experience.
Right, Mark, thank you. I think we've heard enough there. Thank you for your report, and also well done in getting the glider back down safely on the ground without any further incidents.
Okay.
Thanks. Okay, then the next thing I'd like to ask, please, is just for Steve to come up and just give a report on what he felt and what he saw and what his feelings were on the upset or the incident.
Thank you, Steve.
Yeah, so from my end, pretty much corroborates what Mark has said. Just one correction, we're actually in a left-hand turn, not a right-hand turn. So the combination was turning left at approximately 1300 foot AGL, that would be 6.4, 6.5. And I can't tell you whether I felt the jerk on the tug tail first or I saw you first. Fairly simultaneous, my 5 o'clock position, I saw you turning right.
Yeah.
And there was a pitch up from the tail as the rope tensioned up, and then it went away. So I leveled off, thinking that there was a rope failure. That was my initial, because it was a fairly strong jerk. I saw you turning away to the right, so obviously you were off. So then I thought, maybe I've got some rope behind me here. Do I release it or do I just land with it? I eventually decided I had elevator control, reduced speed to about 55 knots, deployed everything, brakes, flaps, decided precautionary landing on 18 right as opposed to doing a circle on 36. Checked the controls, everything seemed fine. Landed 18, taxied up, parked. I was quite surprised to see that I had a complete rope on the end with rings and everything. So yeah, I was a bit confused as to exactly what had happened until Mark explained what had happened behind me. So it was about it from my side. No real issues aside from the jerk on the rope.
Okay, thanks very much. Mark, did you want to say something? You had your
Just a
hand up.
question, so I'm just trying to understand. So when that jerk that you felt, was that the rope trying to unwind itself from something on the glider, or was it that?
So you will have to tell me, I'm assuming that if the rope was lying on the wing
Yeah.
and you were releasing it, so the rope would have been attached at the nose and
Yeah.
lying over the wing.
Yeah.
Now you release it and you start turning to the right while I'm turning to the left.
Yeah.
So then at some point that rope is going to tension up depending on where it was on the wing. So I'm assuming it's folded over the leading edge. And then as you make the turn, the friction
Okay.
on the rope is what will cause the tail of the tug to come up.
There were some marks on the wing.
Yeah, on the left wing.
So that would
The
make
left wing,
sense.
yeah.
So you, Mark, mentioned the rope was looped over the left wing, eh? Yeah, because they were. If you go and have a look at the twin, you'll see some fairly aggressive, abrasive marks, and in fact, there's a little hole on the top wing skin where I think the ring may have impacted.
Okay, so that makes sense. So the rope's folded over, and now as you turn away, it starts to work its way towards the root. And then if the ring's now loose because it's not attached to the hook, then it's flailing around there. That's why it hit the canopy. You say there's a mark on the...
No, I don't, there's no mark on the canopy that I could see, but
No,
on the wing.
you say.
Yes,
So
there's
the
marks.
chances are that the rings also hit at that point. So the rope was flailing around and it bounced around, which you quite the canopy. It would make sense.
Okay, thanks very much, Steve. Okay, there's another little point that I'd just like to bring in as a possibility. Okay, I don't think it's crucial. This point is really that important, but I think it's still just worth mentioning. There's also a possibility that with this, everything happens so fast in an incident like this. You can't always pick up everything or remember everything. But from the marks on the wing, clearly the rope was lying on the wing and possibly hooked over underneath somewhere. I'm not sure, but the possibility that I think may have existed with the situation as well, when Mark released, not under any tension, sometimes the release doesn't actually unhook or fall out of the nose. We've had this before. You try and release the glider when it's being towed by a vehicle and there's no tension on. You pull the release but it doesn't release. So he may have thought he released, or the rope had released from the aircraft, but it may not have. It may have still been stuck slightly on the nose. And the other possibility that I think may have existed, which broke the canopy, is that the rope looped over the wing, got stuck wherever it was stuck, underneath or on top. And when Mark turned away from the tug, thinking it released, the rope may have in fact also been lying over the canopy. And when the rope pulls tight, under tension from still attached to the tug, it may have come down like a guillotine, because it's now stuck on the wing and then it loops over the canopy, and the moment it pulls tight, the rope would pull down, through the canopy. So that's a possibility. But let's not worry too much about what happened there. The most important thing, I think, from this incident and the number of incidents we've had recently, there's been 3 in total that I counted in the last 4 months. And there was in fact an incident on the same day, the Easter weekend, following Mark's incident. Gavin Johnson was towing, and we had a single Aster also behind the Lombardo, and a problem with slack rope. Is that correct, Gavin?
Yeah, he just also got away from them. It wasn't major, but I did feel it.
Yeah, so we have this issue that's developed, and I think what's just crucial is that we must focus on our towing with much attention. Never take your eyes off the tug, because that's also potentially a cause for Mark's incident. He's looking out, not at something else instead of the tug turns left, he looks up, oh, the tug's not there anymore, and you find it to the left. I'm not saying that's what happened, but it does happen quite regularly. So your life is your tow plane. You've got to keep your eyes on it the whole time, and I would recommend strongly that if anyone gets into a similar position where you find yourself out of position, extremely out of position, and you've alarmed by it, instead of trying to fix the situation, you've already screwed up. Pull the release immediately, and that the risk value drops significantly there, because you're not going to make the situation worse. Just release, sacrifice the launch, and land again safely. Okay, are there any questions or comments on what we've discussed?
What you just said, Mark, is exactly that what went through my mind. If you're confused, out of position, especially at that altitude,
Yes.
pull immediately. Yeah. I'm not blaming or whatever, but that's
Yes.
the takeaway from it. But if you're at low level, then it would be a different story. So there's lots of circumstances.
The other thing is, the moment you start to observe the rope is becoming slack, you must, as a pilot or instructor, person in command must try and solve the problem immediately.
Yeah.
And the most practical and easy way to do that on a glider is just to pull the air brake out of it.
Because it can, this kind of situation
Yeah.
can oscillate
And one's got to just time it a little. When you pull the air brakes out, watch the rope start to get taut, and as you see it's getting taut, you lock the brakes again. Takes a little bit of practice. The other thing that causes these potential incidents is currency. We must all please just try and stay current, and if you're an instructor in the back seat, also make sure that you're current, so that you don't get caught off guard by not sitting in the front seat and battling a little bit with the coordination.
the higher mass of the glider controls actually this whole situation.
Yes, and that's a very good point, Dieter, that with the lighter tugs, Lombardas and Sambas, etc., it is very important to maintain the correct tow position and do your best to stay directly behind the tug.
And gliders with water, heavy laden gliders.
Yeah, because there's a lot of inertia and weight
Yeah.
in the gliders, and the upset to the tug can be quite serious
Instant.
and quick.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's the end of my section.
All right. Guys, I'm not going to get into that right away. I'm just going to talk about why I believe a lot of this stuff is happening. Now, as you know, I've been towing with light sport aircraft now for 20 years, and in extreme conditions, 16 years in the Drakensberg. And I never ever had this kind of situation behind the summer. I had upsets, but they were the direct, typical bad release situations or violent turbulence that in one stage turned us upside down. But that happened twice in the Super Cubs as well, so it wasn't a function of a light aeroplane. And what I did notice quite a bit when ropes did go slack is there tended to be into the straps and out, into the straps and out. We didn't seem to end up with this oscillation. And guys, the propensity to have ropes going slack was not something that was really of any major concern. So the other night I lay in bed and I thought, you know, what's happening here? How come? I mean, the guys just haven't stopped learning how to aero tow. And having given it a lot of thought, I came to the conclusion that the Lombarda is a supremely good tow plane. It performs slightly better than a Samba in the climb. It has certain downsides in that it can't descend quite as quickly, etc. But why are we suddenly having these problems, which quite frankly never made themselves apparent behind the Samba? And I put it down to 3 factors. And these 3 factors are not major serious things. It's just we have to consider them as tug pilots and we have to consider them as glider pilots. Firstly, if you put those two aeroplanes together, the Lombarda has a third more wing than the Samba, even in a short wing configuration. That means much lower wing loading and more lift. Number one. Number two, she's a tail dragger. She doesn't have a nose wheel hanging out the front. She's cleaner. She has a lower drag coefficient. Number three, if you put them together, she is substantially longer in fuselage length than a Samba. Number four, she's a T-tail. T-tail, that goes towards the pilot's perception of where he should be behind that tug. We've all been flying behind conventional airplanes for years, and you're behind a Super Cub, we said, drop below the prop wash, which is very obvious, which is you can feel quite well, particularly in a 182, and if you line up with Cubs. Elevator with the trailing edge of the wing, you kind of where you need to be. We don't have those references when you're behind a Lombarda. So let's take them one at a time. What we have to do as tug pilots, guys, is what happens in a Lombarda when you enter the lift is the thing climbs rapidly. She's got a lot less wing loading and a lot more wing. So she climbs rapidly and she's clean. So the Yates effect, why does ropes, let's just get onto this. Nobody's talked about why do ropes go slack. They only go slack in lift, guys. They go slack in lift. Why? Because you're hitting lift and you're out accelerating the tug due to a thing called Yates effect, which is the effect that rising air has on your airspeed. It moves, you'll see the whole thing when I do my other presentation. Angle of attack increases, you move the pressure force, the center of pressure moves forward on the wing, the drag reduces and the aircraft accelerates. Simple as that. So you are accelerating up the back of the tug. We are now for the first time towing a glider with a glider. We were not towing gliders with gliders when I had a Samba. Samba's a light sport aircraft, it's very, very far removed from a motor glider. We are now towing gliders with gliders. It's not necessarily a bad thing, but as tug pilots and as glider pilots, we've got to realize one thing, that when we encounter that lift, I was able to rack my Samba in. She didn't rocket away. She went in, she stayed in, and the glider could follow. Now, with the Lombarda, this particular aeroplane, I know I'm getting into lift long before it even kicks on the barrier. It'll go like that from 60 or 65 knots to 70 knots. Bang, my attitude hasn't changed. It's just gone whack, got this airspeed. If we correct that airspeed, guys, we're going to create an unpleasant situation because we are going to convert speed into height. It's exactly what we do when we fly gliders. And all the guys flying this Lombarda are hardwired glider pilots. I had to hammer that out of my head in the Lombarda, the Samba, when I first started flying the Samba. Boom, Tim Biggs used to call it flying up a flight of stairs. Nature's given you speed, convert it into height. You gain a little bit of height. We must never do that in a tug. So when we turn in the Samba, it didn't matter because she didn't have this propensity to want to climb away. The Lombarda does that. So glider pilots, when you see that airspeed, or you feel that airspeed increase over the nose, your attitude hasn't changed. Maintain that attitude. Keep that speed at 100, at least at 70 knots if you're at 70 knots. Keep it there. You're helping to keep that rope taut. That guy's going to accelerate up behind you. Speed at that point is not a bad thing. And don't racket him. Because she does outperform the Samba, and if you are slow, let's assume you corrected that speed and you went to 60 knots. You then racked it in and suddenly you've climbed again. Now this guy's down here and you're up there. He's now accelerating. The rope's going slack. He's in coffin corner, guys, he can do nothing. If he pulls after you, he's going to tension that rope and he's going to decrease your speed even more. So you don't want a situation where you've got the guy hanging below you with a lot of slack rope. So, as a tug pilot, keep that speed. It will come off of its own accord. It doesn't stay there indefinitely. You go into the lift, it slowly comes back. And if it takes you another 3/4 of a turn or even a turn to center the lift, it's not a problem. These tugs are averaging 6, 7, 8 minutes max. They're very, very efficient from that point of view. So if it costs another 30 seconds, it doesn't matter. Be a little bit circumspect racking the thing in. So turn it in and check if you have to. I've been doing it the last couple of tows. As that speed comes on, if need be, I actually pressure a little bit. Keep it there and allow it to come off slowly as you turn into the lift. So there's not this massive differential in vertical separation between the two aircraft. Okay. The other thing that we've noticed, I very seldom ever had a pitch problem in this direction. With the longer lever arm of the Lombarda, if you do get into that situation where everything's getting slow and you've got a slack on the rope and the rope comes taut, you feel her pitch. And I've had a situation where I've been down at 55 knots and asked for more speed. Well, I can do nothing, guys. You are so low down there, I can't see you in the mirror. That I'm through the gate, my tail's down, my stick is going onto the forward stop. There's not a hell of a lot more that I can do. So, what do we do as glider pilots? As glider pilots, we fly rather err on the higher side than the lower side. Get that aircraft into that prop wash if you have to. It's so mild you don't even feel it. Get into that prop wash. Give yourself latitude if the rope does go slack. The same as you give yourself latitude when you're landing a glider. You keep those air brakes so you can open them or close them. You've got latitude. You don't come in with full brake or with no brake. Set yourself up so that if you do accelerate, you can, with still keeping your nose where it should be in the general direction of the tug, exactly as Mark said, just crack those brakes. That's what we used to do in Bitterwasser and places like that when the ropes were all over the place. I don't subscribe, and I never have, to side slipping. It's great in a K6, great in a K7. Doesn't work well, and I certainly wouldn't want John kicking his rudders all around the place in a JS1 full of water when things were going. That's how they spin off the back end of tugs. So give yourself that latitude. Remember, you're in lift. That's why the rope's going slack. So you're probably going to have the rope slack and you're going to be climbing out. So that brake helps you in two ways. It arrests your ascent, and it puts a bit of drag on and slows you down. And the key is, as it comes taut, get a rope right. But position yourself so that you've got latitude on each side of that thing. So I would start saying we need to see. You must be able to see the mirror on that tug. If you can't see the mirror, the tug pilot can't see you, and you're too low. And when you're in that prop wash, you can go just below it, or you can even just go above it. You can fly wherever you like. Being high is only really dangerous when you're being slingshotted, which we'll talk about just now too. So position yourself that you've got all that latitude. And then on takeoff, stay with the Lombard. Don't sit on the deck in low tow and let that aeroplane climb out rapidly in a strong wind. She'll climb very quickly. And remember, when that rope goes slack, that aeroplane thinks, haha, I've got no drag on me anymore. It goes off like a racehorse out of the gate. Somebody didn't used to do that, but this thing does. So, just stay with him in the same air mass. You don't want him climbing out into an inverted wind gradient while you're sitting down here, because then you're going to start closing that horizontal distance. You're going to get a power failure because you're going to get slack in the rope. So stay with him all the way. If he's bombing down the hill because you're in a heavy glider, just stay with him. And you Lombardo pilots, don't climb out rapidly. There's no point in doing that. You can climb out. She climbs perfectly out at 60 knots. It's where the sweet spot is on that wing. If you've got a heavier ship, then 65 knots. 70 knots, it's really heavy. You will get off the end there. It can generate lots of lift. So glider pilots, make sure you can see the wing, make sure you're in high tow. Glider pilots and tug pilots, don't bleed the speed off into height. Be a little bit careful of turning tight.
Level tow, huh?
Level tow or just below. It can be just below, it doesn't have to be level tow, but err on the higher side rather than the lower side. Because it gives you that latitude to be able to, very difficult to control a rope when the tug's up here and this bloody rope's doing this. Tug's in front of you, you can control it. You've got heights to play with. Down here you can do bugger all. It happened to me instructing not that long ago. Same thing, guy suddenly got out of position and I realized the tug was, I'm out of here. Pulled and released. And you're always in danger there that you're going to smack it, break a canopy. All right, so that's really the lessons we've learned from this aeroplane. Guys, think about it, and if you've got any questions afterwards, then you can talk to me.
Just a point about
I'm listening.
my position behind the tug. As I say, with the T-tail, you have no reference, like on the top of the canopy or the top of the pilot's head or whatever. If there was a stripe around the tail, the fin, at the correct position, that you could line that stripe up on the top of the canopy, would make it a hell of a lot easier. Super Cub and the Cessnas and all that are very easy because you've got the tails and the wings in the right place.
John, I'd like to just mention a point on that specifically. I beg to differ on the reference on the Lombardo. Okay, I've developed an easy way to see if you're in that sweet spot like you're describing. I don't think a stripe on the fin may help much. I think what's important is to look at the wing. There's two references actually that I find very useful. There's the mirror on the left-hand side above the wing, which we need to improve. I believe the mirror is not 100% right yet. But if you can see the mirror, you at about the right height. If you're too high, you see the top of the wing. You don't see the underside. If you're in the slipstream or slightly below, you can actually see the profile of the wing, the top and the bottom. If you look carefully, if you're too low, you see the underside of the wing. If you get too high, you see the top of the wing. So I think the wing itself is a very good reference to get into the right position. That's what I found.
Okay, I've only had that one toe with the Lombardo, so that was the thing that struck me straight away. And I think I mentioned it to Hendrik as well.
Okay.
There was no, if you're trying to get back into position, you really don't want to be saying, is that the slipstream or not the slipstream or whatever.
Yeah.
2 marks, what did you say now? It makes sense.
Yeah.
You'll see the full profile of the wing, and that's the right. That's great.
We can ask other pilots, maybe after the meeting, but for me that reference of the wings is very
you know what I use as a
very
reference? The horizon and the main wing. I keep the main wing just above the horizon.
and that works.
It works well, and I mean that's what everybody in Europe does that.
Okay.
They don't do lotos like we do.
Right. Okay, thanks for that point, John.
Just one point.
Yes.
He mentioned the mirror, which is a very tiny mirror.
Yes.
And it gives you maybe a little bit of an indication where your glider is. As a tug pilot, you need to know where that glider is, and then this situation may not have been developed as Mark has described. If we would put a reviewer camera in there with a little screen, yes, I know including the mirror, you have a much better awareness where that glider is.
Yeah,
also during training, off position training, because it's not, you can't do the off position training as well as behind a Super Cup or behind a Cessna.
Yeah.
So that would help greatly if you could think about that, and you probably as a technical person may have something that as a solution there.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up. That's another point that we wanted to address at this safety meeting. After the meeting is to resolve the mirror issue, and we also discussed getting a GoPro camera, mounting it on behind the cockpit, facing backwards, with a mount for a cell phone or something.
Right.
And then we use the software, so you can see an actual live picture of what's going on behind you.
Be careful of that because there'll be a delay.
That's a project.
Yeah, so that's a work in progress now.
Perfect.
Okay, so
I'm happy to hear that.
sorted. Thanks.
Mark, I'm happy to help with that. The software and the GoPro will have a delay.
Okay.
So if we have something that's a little bit more real time onto a dedicated display, it'll work a lot better.
Okay, well, if you could possibly help us with that, Brendan, because it's right up your street. Thanks.
Western plays its bad part now. Cannot do much better.
Modern technology.
It's the same argument that all the pilots have is whether you have an E6B, the very latest machine. But this machine batteries a cat, the E6B still happens to work.
Okay, Stoyan, there's one thing I'd just like to do, my pre-takeoff checks
Cool, let's do that.
for everyone while they're setting up. Okay, I just want to mention when I was in Australia a couple of years ago doing gliding there, they had a pre-takeoff checklist which was pretty simple called CARDS, C-A-R-D-S. Okay, that's what the GFA has, but we don't have to have the same one, but we need some sort of pre-takeoff checklist that the wing runners must install before each launch of a glider, whether it's winch or aerotow. We do have this in process, but sometimes we let it lax, or the person running the wing hasn't done the correct course. So the cards that the Australians use stands for, now the glider's about to be launched. Okay, the rope is being attached. Cards canopy, air brakes closed and locked, red tape or any tape closing water vents, for gliders that are carrying water, that the tape has been removed. And also under the rope, has the rope been attached properly and correctly in the right place on the nose hook or the belly hook, depending on what the launch method is. D, dolly, no dolly on the glider. And final one is S, security. The normal look around checks, is it clear for the launch? So I think it's important for us under our operations just to ensure that whoever's helping on the ground as a wing runner or ground crew has the correct training and guidance, so that we can ensure that a launch leaves the runway safely. We've had a couple of instances where people have taken off with the canopy not closed, and we've had incidents and issues. So if you install the correct checks to these guys, we're not going to have any issues with a takeoff. Okay, that's my view.
Okay, so about the qualifications.
Gentlemen, I know that I've resigned from the flying safety, but one thing that in my 41 years of flying, if you ever have an incident, it is quite important that you don't go up in the air again. I know you've made you feel good and all that, but you do not go and take off again. You're hyped up, you've had an incident, things could go wrong again. The next takeoff, if something small out of the ordinary happens, you may react to it completely incorrectly. And nobody and I, when we were flying, was ever allowed to fly so soon again after an incident, especially carrying passengers, etc. like that. So we don't want to create a precedence, although I know it went very well on your side, that it's a complete no-no to go and actually fly again after quite an incident like that, in the sense that you're still in a state of shock after that type of incident. So you are more cautious possibly, but you are probably so cautious that anything that may look wrong, you react to. And that could be a very dangerous situation. So I must say, I was surprised when I read that the pilot went off again straight after it, and he had a good flight. It worked out very well. But do not create a precedence that this must be done. It's not like falling a horse and getting back on the damn thing again and riding. This is in the air. And I really strongly oppose to that, for the day at least today, to let that person sit down and relax and think about it. before you fly again. Please.
Peter, sorry, just a comment. Would you advocate if somebody really needs to fly or wants to fly to ask a friend or a qualified pilot to fly with him or her after an incident? Would that help?
That may help, yes, but now
Psychologically,
not,
right?
not psychologically, you're not taking the whole thing back into the same situation you were again. Taking another passenger, the same passenger in this case, that is also highly tense.
There's no dispute. What I mean is, should have, if Mark or whoever has an incident, to say to myself or yourself or whatever, come, let's go and have a flight.
Absolutely.
Would that be something you would advocate?
I would, depending on the type of incident and etc. You know, you just have a cable break on the winch launch.
Okay.
You know, that's sort of part of the training that you're actually doing in any case. So it's not such a bad incident. So you can't lay down the rule, but just to jump straight back into a glider solo, I must say, in all the safety times that we've been in the whole 41 years of flying, we never allowed that pilot to fly instantaneously again. No matter who it was. Even if it was a cabin crew doing something wrong, they were immediately just offloaded or grounded to recover for their own benefits. It's not a punishment against that person as we try and see it to be, but I do oppose something going immediately after that again. It's completely wrong.
But with another pilot?
That's different. That's a different scenario. After a while, and the briefing and all those good things, that's not like, that's to alleviate that problem there with another instructor or whatever it may be. But to go straight up again, to gain your confidence again, is completely against the safety issues in aviation. That's just the point of view. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Peter.
Okay, for a safety officer for our club, I'd like to add to that. Thank you, Peter. Okay, in light of the recent incidents that we've had, these towing incidents, I would like to suggest, and I've spoken to the people involved with these incidents behind the Lombardo, and I've recommended that the two that are, I feel, fairly serious or important, that the guys do a check ride in the Twin Aster with another instructor with immediate effect, today even if possible. So I'd like Mark to take a check ride on tow behind the Lombardo with...
Ready, set it up.
Okay, yeah, so that's great. And then there's one other instructor that I've spoken to that I've insisted that he does a check ride as well, who had a similar or two similar events recently. So that should hopefully address the ongoing problem for them.
Mark, can I just say, as a relative novice pilot, I would appreciate it if I'm behind the tug and the pilot picks up that I've got a bad habit or I did something relatively stupid.
Yes.
And just to say that to me afterwards, not be hesitant to come to me and say to me, I suggest you do this or this because that was probably dangerous, because I might be doing something that I don't even realize.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
No, thanks. That's actually a standard practice that all of our instructors and aviators in the gliding community normally do. So we actually take a lot of pride in trying to help anyone that has got any issues or problems. Okay, so thank you for bringing that up. Guys, please don't feel otherwise. If you see an issue and you would like to have a little private chat to the guy involved, do so. It works out well.
Is there any way they can...
Google the first line. I chose to turn my head away. It relates the whole thing. Never be afraid to go to somebody and say, you screwed up,
Yes.
do something about it.
Yeah, I've been
Whether it's
spoken to many
Whether
times.
it's the lowest student, the CFI.
Yeah,
If you see the CFI doing something wrong, you must talk to them about it.
yeah. No, it's something that I think we all appreciate, and I've been spoken to many a time, and I've always thought about what the person had to say, and it made me a safer or better pilot afterwards.
The case in point, what Gavin said about he never had a problem in the berg. I've had 2 instances where I've had to release, and a number of instances, right? So it's just going to be interesting. And the factor is the turning of the lombarda and the slower speed of the lombarda. So the radius of turn is much less in the lombarda than the Cessna. So in essence, you can actually keep the lombarda in the thermal, which is good, which is great. That's fantastic. The whole combination goes up like fire. But the problem is, you've got this combination. You've got a tow rope of 100 meters doing a 300 meter diameter circle. So what happens? You end up, this whole thing gets out here. And I've had a number of students, and twice with the Jadis, you got so far out, well, no, I can't fix this now. I have to let this go. So, and it's always in the turn to the outside, into the thermal, a tight turn. This whole thing slides out, and it's a factor of the radius of the turn, the length of the tow rope, and the fact that once the plane comes out, the lombarda's light, so it actually starts slowly lombarda. So the glider takes the energy, and the lombarda loses the energy. So then when the whole thing starts to come back, it's like this. I'm also not convinced that low tow is great at the initial start of takeoff and for the tow pilot, but once you're actually in the air, I'm sure it's more difficult to do low tow, especially with like the lombarda. It's much better to have the combination of just a nice little tow. For whatever reason, it seems that people get here and they get lower and lower and lower, and then it's like, oh shit, I'm like suddenly low, like something clicks. It's like the frog in boiling water. They get lower and lower, and then eventually it's like, shit, well, I need to fix this now. And they pull or do something, but at least when it's on high tow, and for me high tow is the plane is on the horizon, that's it. You don't need to see the top of the wing, you don't need to see the bottom of the wing. If the wheels on the plane are on the horizon, you're in the right place.
Just a difference of opinion on that. In low tow, the glider can get right underneath you with the rope tight and still see you. You can't go very, very high in a high tow and he loses sight of you, and it's mandatory for him to release. You don't have to go too high. I hear what you're saying, John, and I know Dodge fly level tow and those guys, but it's just a point, and it's based on the fact that if you lose sight of the tow, you must release. But you only have to go 10 feet up in high tow and you're gone.
Yeah.
Go right below. And I've done the experiment.
Okay. Thanks, John. I think to summarize on John's comments and points, which are valid, I think that as listening to Gavin's advice behind the lombarda, I think it's best to try and stay in the slipstream or just below. Let's not get too low and obviously too high. Okay.
I saw like your takeoff yesterday. You were super low, and I'm thinking this is just an upset waiting to happen, because all he needs to do is get into that thermal at the end of the runway. That's what we have. We have that thermal at the end of the runway. He needs to get into that curl over thermal and go up. Now you're too low, right? And then you hit that thing, and now you're going and you slingshot yourself out, because now he's down. He's coming all the way down, and you coming all the way up into that thermal. And that's what it is. So I really agree with you. We have to, the slipstream on the lombarda is just, it's not like the Cessna, we're quite low down. This thing is just this there. So just park off anything, just be just below it. I think that is super important. When you see that thing, it just, to me, just when I observed yours yesterday, and I thought, hey, wait. This, to me, doesn't make sense to be there.
Are you talking about the shortly after takeoff? I was
just shortly after takeoff, yeah.
Because it doesn't take. You would have noticed later on. It doesn't take me long to pull up into the back, into the right position.
Yeah. I observed that and I walked away because I was busy doing something else. I just saw that split second and then I didn't follow because I know I don't have to worry about it.
People that stay with him in that situation, what we're trying to avoid, and it'll come out now in this presentation, is guys having to pull to stay with the tuck. Increases tow line tensions and all sorts of shit can happen. So rather just stay with them, especially with the lighter tucks.
Yeah.
And remember, on a strong wind like we had yesterday, also you're flying, you're sitting down there, you've got plenty. That guy's flying into an inverted gradient.
Yeah. Okay, thanks for that observation, Andreas. Okay.
Okay, guys, I'm going to try and keep this as quick as I can. A lot of you have seen it, but particularly people like Pete over here, who's flying a belly-hooked aeroplane, hadn't seen this. And belly hooks do present slightly more risk than a nose-hooked aeroplane when it comes to the slingshot accident. And we've had a number of them in the last couple of years worldwide. You will see some of the pictures later. But I'll try and keep it as short and sweet as I can. And there's nothing wrong with flying with a belly hook. You've just got to be aware of where the potential risks lie. I flew all my life with a Yarmouth and 16 years in the Berg as well. Belly hook, no problem. But I was taken aside when I bought that aeroplane. And Timmy Big said, "You realise what you've got here." And he gave me a big lecture and I never forgot it. So, what we don't want to do is have that on our conscience that we kill the tug pilot. We just don't know why it's doing this. I'm not quite sure what's it. Okay, I'm not going to run through these statistics are very old. I did this presentation first in 2014. But basically what it's saying is that there have been a number of upsets around the world. This was in the UK alone, there were 5 fatalities and some close recoveries, etc., etc. There were 17 upsets between 2004 and 14, and that was just in the UK. So, basically, if you fly an aircraft that uses a belly hook, there's a real danger that the high tow rope tensions can overload the horizontal compensating lift force. So in other words, if your aircraft pitches up, the only thing you can do is put the stick forward and try and pick it up. If, however, you have got no authority over that tail, you become a kite. And that's where the problem lies, is resulting in an uncontrolled pitch up. And even though the stick is fully forward, and the aircraft is well above the stall. Now, how did they discover this? Years ago, back in the late 60s, the then BGA head of training, Chris Rowlands, decided that they had a number of fatals. So they went up on, I forget the aeroplane, I think it was a K7 or something like that. It was a high-wing fabricant tubular aircraft. And a guy called Verdun Luc was flying the Super Cub, and they did all sorts of positional stuff. He went as high as he could until Verdun Luc was literally struggling to bring the tail down. Nothing really major, just very uncomfortable for the pilot. And then he went back into his position at their normal tow speed. He took the stick and he went bang, and all hell broke loose. She went woof, and then rocketed over the top of the tug. Verdun Luc said he just felt the thing go like that. He pulled, and before he knew it, he was on his back. Okay, so then they thought, why is this happening? And this is your typical slingshot. So that we will go into. I don't know how many of you have ever done this. Water skiing. You will kind of know what kinetic energy does when you're water skiing. I used to ride a boat a lot. My ex-wife was a fantastic water skier, and I'd be bombing along in this ski boat. She would cut through the wake on her ski. She'd get out that side. Arms would come up. Rope would go slack, and then she'd pull and dig. And I was going, whoa, trying to keep the ski boat, and she went bah, 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 through the wake. Come around that side, slack rope, and then power on the rope, and bang, bang, bang the other way. I was in the ski boat, I was attached to the water. I had to correct. When you're in a tug, you're in the sky. And that sort of tensions come, you become a hub on a wheel. It's over the top. So that's just one of the layman's ways of looking at it. This is your typical slingshot accident. If the glider is allowed to climb rapidly behind the tug, it can very quickly become impossible to prevent it accelerating rapidly upwards. The slingshot accident, at least action, decelerates the tug and pitches it into a vertical dive. So what happens is the guy starts to decelerate, his tail's coming up, he automatically pulls the stick back, he stalls the elevator, game over, and the glider's over the top of him. In the event of this sequence occurring accidentally as a result of inadvertent pitch up of the glider pilot, there is no chance that either the glider pilot or the tow pilot will recognize the problem and release in the available time. That's quoting Chris Rowlands, who did all the tests. Lapse time 2 to 3 seconds, from 100 kilometers an hour to 150 k's an hour. Those figures came from a case 7, not from a sleek glider shown in the picture. In fact, he went to 155, ended up vertical. So this can happen less likely with an aircraft with a nose hook. Nose hook, if you start getting high, the tension on the rope tends to pitch your nose down, which is exactly what you want to happen. With a belly hooked aeroplane, it's slightly different. And why is there a problem? Basic forces acting on an aircraft on tow. This 15 meter sailplane, pretty basic, shows the aerodynamic forces. There's a lift factor, there's the wing lift, you've got your weight, your drag, and you've got a slight tail upwards component pulling against. This is a belly hooked aeroplane. And that's where the problem lies, guys. That's where the problem lies. So, also, the effective angle of climb, and this is why, particularly in powerful tugs, you don't want to go hauling off because you increase tow line tension quite a lot. Steepness of climb angle adds directly to tow line tension, and during a sudden pitch up, the wing loading will increase. The load in the rope can go from 20 pounds to more than 800 pounds in a split second. And how much lift can an elevator create to counter such tow line induced downloads? Richard H. Johnson, who used to do a lot of all the tests on all the gliders for years, I don't even know if he's still alive, read an article that he put together, and he said in a 15, they also did tests, in a 15 meter glass sailplane, if you are nose high, stick forward, anything beyond 13 degrees in a normal tow situation of angle of attack, once that stick is on forward stop, you will stall that elevator and you won't be able to counteract the pitch up moment. Everything combines into one piece of lift, as it should, to do normal stable flight, and the thing just rockets and you've got nothing happening on the tail. Okay, so any further increase of angle of attack, an angle of attack of about 13 degrees with full stick forward is about the limit. Any further increase in angle of attack is likely to stall the tail and cause a potentially disastrous, uncontrolled pitch up. Tow line tension force combines with wing and fuselage lift, and it forces, and these forces pitch up the nose. So when you look at a belly hook, there's your center of gravity. On a nose hook, you're pulling right on the gravity. Here, you have got a lever arm around that C of G. And that distance between your center of gravity and your belly hook and the moment of pitch up is directly proportional to that distance. And on things like K7s and that, obviously it's a lot higher than it is on your normal glass aeroplane. So your low belly hook location combined with high tow rope tensions can produce a major pitching up moment, the magnitude of which is directly proportional to the distance of the tailplane's tow hook below the center of gravity. If you add water, you increase that vertical, you actually raise the vertical height of the center of gravity. And as they say, as he said in his article, he says most of these guys, we know a lot about the longitudinal, but we never really consider much about the vertical. But it doesn't help it can make it even worse if you've got a lot of water. So, and if you've got an aircraft with an aft C of G, as a lot of our aircraft have, near the aft limit, that also increases the potential for slingshot upsets. And water ballast, of course, increases tow rope tension, which is what starts the problem in the first place, as well as the vertical height of the C of G. Thus, the increased tow rope tension has a longer vertical lever arm between the belly and the hook. And all of these combine to do a pitch up. Then we have the short rope. Obviously, the shorter the rope, the quicker this is going to happen. So there we show 200-foot rope, 60 meters, 300-foot rope. If I was to climb 100 feet on a 100-foot rope, I'd be at top of the tug. If I had to climb one on a shorter rope, I've only travelled a hell of a lot less, half the distance almost, and it's only 23 feet. And if I'm on a 200-meter rope, I've got that much more latitude. So the shorter the rope, the quicker it happens, and so be it. And that's why we don't fly on ropes less than 50, 55 meters. And with the Lombarda, maybe 60 would be better. Okay, you see that, eh? And these are just factors that contribute. Light pilots with minimum cockpit load, be careful. Inexperienced tow pilots, particularly winch launch pilots. Think about that, winch launch pilots. And those high altitude doesn't mean a hell of a lot to them. They're quite happy to pull the stick back and go. Okay?
We've always briefed that at Nationals.
It's winch launch pilots. We've had it.
Every other club. If you're a winch pilot, think about it.
Yeah.
Being like that means nothing to you.
It means nothing to you. I mean, that's exactly what killed Jenny Hooper. And the pilot on the back had limited aero tow time, but he'd had a lot of push time. Okay, high wing loading gliders with CFG hooks, short tow ropes, turbulent conditions, strong lift conditions, and Yates effect. That's what causes the slack in the rope in the first place. Distractions outside and inside the cockpit, and inexperienced pilots in turbulent conditions. We've had that before in this club, where I told them don't fly, and then I go down to the road to the Wimpy and I see them parked in a field, because they did fly. Yates effect, very quickly guys. That's that increase in speed I was talking about when you hit the wind. So very basically, you've got a vertical thermal upgust, W, and the resultant velocity of the air because of the angle of attack goes to V1. That then pitches your load comes L1 and your drag actually decreases. And that is the acceleration moment. It is the wind velocity, the lift velocity over the velocity of the aircraft times its weight. And that gives you an acceleration moment. And that is what makes your aircraft close their distance between the tug pilot and the glider. And that happens to all aeroplanes. Your Boeing 747 would have done the same thing. Maybe it wasn't that noticeable, but it's certainly noticeable in a glider. Wind gradient, here we're talking about what I said to Mark. There you see it. If you climb very rapidly in the tug, and the glider pilot stays in the low tow position, he's sitting in a 45 km/h headwind, and you're down in a 20 km/h headwind. Okay? That's going to take tension off the rope. It's going to make the whole thing even worse. Stay in the same air mass, in strong wind particularly, as the aircraft you're towing behind. Okay, because he's got a high angle of attack and he's only at 85 km/h at the bottom there. The guy at the top, he's got a low angle of attack, but his airspeed, he's at 130, he's got a reducing ground speed. You know, he's in a blow there, he's got a lot of air movement on the nose. The guy on the bottom doesn't have. Be careful of that scenario. It's not, and it also leads to, oh shit, the tug's climbing away, I need to follow him. Load the rope. Bang. Saw it happen. This airfield in 2014. This bottom of the tug, bang, game over. Just slack rope. Up here, bang, bang, douche, down. Horrible. That's something I want to see again. El Mirador, perfect example. I had that happen in El Mirador. You're flying into he's going into the lee of the trees and you going over the top of the trees into this blast over the top. And this guy's down there sitting in the blanket effect, into the lee of the trees. And it's horrible. I had it once where I could see that guy and you can't release him because you're going to kill him in those trees. And you're hanging on the top of the trees and now he's pulling because he's trying to miss the trees. And that rope goes taut and everything comes off the clock and you stagger over the top of the trees. Use corp. I always say to that guys, think about what you're doing when you take off. Think I'm going out, I'd better stay in the same air mass as that aircraft in front of me.
That's the situation I had, and the glider had his air brakes up.
Yeah. Basically, then it's real disaster. That is, the rope snapping taut pulls the tail down and decays the speed even more. So he's had, the glider's basically having a power loss situation there, you decreasing, and then suddenly it's going to snap taut. Very dangerous. And he's flying into the turbulence behind the trees as well. Now, low tow position, this is just stolen straight out of the FAA book. Above the wake, below the wake, I would suggest that we stay, you know, in this area here, or even there. Once you, particularly when it's stronger, we just don't want to be way down here. But be able to see that mirror on that tug, if it's such a tiny thing, we really have to address that problem, guys. Because if we can see the position, and we can feel the position where that glider pilot should be, we can tell him, come up, that's perfect. Everything just levels out, the aircraft is nice and neutral, everything is right. And then he'll get used to that visual picture. But at the moment, 90% of the time, you don't know where he is because you can't see him. He's either too low or he's out to one side, you see his tip of his wing. We need to get some sort of decent view out the back of that Lombardo. Guys, it's happening all over the world. This was 2019. Now this is a very interesting thing. I had a guy who was partner in the Janus who came out from Alberta, exactly where this happened. And we released, and he said, jump, and he rounded off to the right. I said, what's going on here? Just, you know, he broke away. Watch where the tug goes. No. The tug goes left, we go right. Simple as that. That's what we do in Alberta. That's what we taught. I said, are you nuts? Never lose sight. And why turn your back on each other? Release. Normally you're in a turn. I said, what if you're in a left-hand turn in a thermal? He says, we still go right. So you turn out of the lift.
That's BGA as well.
I said, you nuts. When you release, boom, you're now watching. Ropes away. I see it snake away. I see the tug do this. I watch the tug. I'm looking. There's nobody else. I know where the tug is. I'm seeing this. So we go. To turn that way is ridiculous. I said, you're going to kill somebody one day. You're going to collide with each other. It happened 3 months after he got back. Those two aircraft collided. The 182 was towing that ASK 21. The mid-air collision happened 34 seconds after release, killing both the guys on board. Why? Because the rope was slack. The oak released. Didn't tell the tug pilot. He didn't realize. He climbed away and he thought, oh, the guy is off. Then he turned, started to descend. This guy was turning here. Descended straight into it. Bang. Okay. This happened just last year sometime. This guy, you can read it for yourself after the takeoff, canopy opened. I'll read it. Following a normal takeoff, I'll point out, you can't really see, it doesn't really work that well. Following a normal takeoff from the tow plane, the airplane pilot initiated, the tow pilot initiated a slight right turn. And shortly after, the glider canopy opened. The pilot of the glider stated that the canopy began flapping open and closed, and he attempted to secure it and control the glider. He added that he briefly became disorientated and turned back towards the airport. No mention of release. Turned back towards the airport. Witness stated that the visibility from the glider to the tow plane appeared to be potentially to have been an issue, as there was a 30 to 40 angle on the tow line. That was a high angle, not a low angle, otherwise they would have been on the ground. Witness added that both the tow plane and the glider near the end of the runway, and the tow pilot cut the tow line. He released. However, there was an aggressive he was in an aggressive nose-low attitude, so he was starting to pitch. He released. He impacted the ground 45 degrees. So there he's taking off. He's here. Tug pilot's there. He's climbing. You can see, if you look carefully, if you came up to this, the tug's like that, the glider's like this. You can see the angle of attack. Remarkably more there than it is there. Now he's right up here. Tug hasn't pitched yet. And a split second later, he was here and he was there and he was dead. Okay. Slingshot accident. When you have a canopy problem like that and you're on tow, forget it. If you're low, just let it flap around, fly the aeroplane. If you lose sight, get the hell off there. Never turn away unless you know you've released. To 2020, slingshot accident. It was a whole thing, I didn't put it on it, but Anchor Scout, so that's the same size aeroplane, probably a bit bigger than a Super Cub. Killed the pilot. Dynamic. Got one at Potch. August 2018, slingshot accident. Killed the tug pilot. And then this is a really light aircraft. This was an Icarus. And that's a very slow airplane. I wouldn't like to tow with an Icarus. I've always said I will never tow with a Lombardi in the Drakensberg. Happy to do it with the Samba for 20 years. Wouldn't do it in a Lombardi. And I wouldn't tow with an Icarus. I've flown them. They just, to me, that's not the right thing. Not to be towing a big, heavy ship like this. Shortly after takeoff, I don't really know the circumstances, but it killed the tug pilot. The Robin, it's not a light sport aircraft. Slingshot. The guy pulled out just at the last moment, but hit back to the ground, still didn't survive it. May 2020. In Orient Airfield in 2014. 2014. Okay. Don't let the tug pilot pay the price for your inability to stay in position behind the tug plane. Particularly with the Lombardas, you've got to be that much sharper, guys. Stay where you should be. Do checks more if you have to, then take more checks. And if you ever lose sight of the tow plane, you release immediately, regardless of your airspeed, your position, your height, anything. You lose sight of him, you climb off. He's the guy most likely to be killed in this scenario, not you. Okay, you as a glider pilot, you hold a gun to that tug pilot's head and it's cocked. Make sure you never get to pull the trigger. Okay, let's make sure it doesn't happen again. That's just the wheel of this 182. Any questions?
It's all very sobering, Gary.
All very sobering, but we need to be sobering things. So I must spin lectures too. I'm not here to make you think that these problems don't exist. They do exist. Guys die weekly from spin stall accidents. Let's not tell ourselves that this is so such a safe sport that we really don't have to worry about any of this stuff. We do. It's happened on our airfield. Let's not let it happen again, guys. Okay. Thank you very much.
Thanks,
You can all go fly safely.
Well, can the instructor stay back just for 15, 20 minutes?
Small break.
Small break, 5-minute break.